Hey, welcome everyone to another workshop here at the test camp. This is FTCE GK English Language Skills. So this is the first of the 4 workshops for the general knowledge test. Let's discuss how learning and practicing test skills will empower your test confidence. Now, those of you joining us live online, you're welcome to contribute your comments anytime. We're going to include them up here on our discussion boards. And if you join us directly through the Test Camp YouTube channel, of course, you can pause or restart or replay that video anytime. Again, this workshop is for the general knowledge test, and we suggest that you train in this order. And so if those who have gone before you say the same thing. The first 3 tests are related to communication, and the competencies are built in sequence. So this workshop is the first in that order. That mathematics workshop, that's a standalone. You can do that anytime. That's what's called a computation test. All right, you likely know by now that around here our motto is prepare, then practice, and then perform. And everyone who successfully completed the training has passed their test. You might ask how that's possible. Well, that's because test taking is a skill, and up till now there's not been a place where you can go and get practice done. So you get the practice done, you learn what you need to do, you get the test skills done, you pass. It's that simple. Let's go ahead and get started. So to prepare here at the test camp means to understand yourself also. It's taking an honest assessment of how well you know the test content, but also how well you know your testing skills. And we start by learning the test blueprint. Many of you have participated in these other teacher career workshops, so you know how important the blueprint is. This can also be a good first step to creating what we call my study plan. And that's a schedule that includes reviewing and studying test content. There's no tips or tricks. You put in the work, you pass the test. Let's learn about the blueprint. Here's an overview of the entire GK, general knowledge test. Notice it's a series of 4 individual tests, every one different. And that's one reason why many teachers and teacher candidates decide to schedule 2 days to complete the exam rather than just on one. So check with your test administrators, make sure you can do that, and there's no extra charge if that's something you'd like to do. Your English language skills test has 40 multiple choice questions, and the time allotted is 40 minutes, so you can do that math, about an average of 1 minute for each question. Knowing this, though, helps put you on a plan for success, because you know when to decide, when to answer a question, and when to mark and save a question for another time. Now that's a skill we're going to practice over at the training center. All right, our first step now is to go ahead and start identifying what types of English language skills questions you can expect to encounter in your test. Now, not the question format. We know that all 40 questions are formatted multiple choice. What we're talking about here is identifying the English language skills competencies on which the test questions were built. On this test, there's 4 competencies. We're going to look at each one individually here today. The first quiz that we created for the first competency there is called structure. If you take a quiz over at the training site based on this competency, you're going to get instant feedback on how well you did, and it's going to point you in a direction where you might want to review and study. The second competency is vocabulary. Now this might sound like a competency you can easily recognize, but there's more to vocabulary than you might think. So we'll take a closer look at this competency in just a moment with some sample questions. The third competency is conventions. Any reading people in here, writing English? What are conventions? Anybody know? Very good. Yeah, that's what I would say too. It's basically another word for the rules. So can you imagine what might be asked about the conventions or the rules of English? Imagine what those questions might look like. If you've been through a teacher education program, especially for elementary grades, you likely know the conventions can be thought of in 3 main areas. How many people in here are in elementary ed? Okay, most of us. How many are secondary or your secondary teacher? Okay, we have a few. The first area is called usage. Okay, the usage of words. The second convention or the second rule has to do with the mechanics. And anybody remember the third area? Okay, it's called sentence formation. This is the competency that tests your ability to use phrases and clauses, ideas, that sort of thing, in a way that makes sense to the reader. So here are the competencies. Before I said there's 4, but I think we're seeing here that there's 5. So one of these is not on the test. Before we go any further, take a moment to introduce yourself at the tables there and see if you can determine which of these competencies is the one that's least likely to be tested in a multiple choice format. All right, take a couple of minutes and we'll compare your answers when we come back as a group. Hey, if you're joining us today live online, share your thoughts and we'll include them in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand by the Test Camp YouTube channel, welcome again. This might be a good time to pause the recording and think through these competencies. Which one's the least likely to be addressed on a multiple choice test? All right, we'll be here when you restart the video. Yeah, over here. We gotta get started. Okay. With this group down here, what did you decide? Which competency is not on the test? Sentence formation, absolutely. So why did you say that? I'll repeat for the people listening in. Right, because you can't very well show your ability to structure sentences on a multiple choice test. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So how would you do it? You'd have them write sentences, right? In your case, you have to write an essay. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If you wanted your students to form sentences, you wouldn't use a multiple choice test. You'd have them write sentences, right? And again, you have to write a full essay. We'll talk about that in the third workshop. All right, so let's take a closer look at each competency, beginning with structure. From the test information guide, which is approved by the State Department of Education, we know that these are the three main concepts related to English language structure. All right, I'm going to say them for the people who might not be able to see this. I don't like to read off the PowerPoints, but modifiers, parallelism, and syntax. So everybody's familiar with these terms, right? Are you ready to answer test questions based on all three of these? Now here's how we can find out. No, not by looking at sample questions, by explaining them to each other aloud. So here we go again. Turn to your neighbors. All right, explain these concepts to each other. Let's see how well you actually know them and how ready you are to take this test. We'll come back in a couple minutes and talk about how it went at your table. Okay, again, for you folks joining us today on live, share your thoughts and we'll include them up here on the discussion boards. And if you're joining us on demand by the Test Camp YouTube channel, here's another opportunity to pause the recording and explain these concepts aloud, either to yourself or to someone there in your group. Can you do it? All right, we'll be here when you restart the video. How'd it go back there? All right? Oh, not that well. Why not? Okay, so these aren't concepts you talk about every day. Well, that's a good point. It's probably been a while. But you're going to talk about them as a teacher, especially if you're in elementary ed, right? Maybe not all the time, but quite a bit more often. So here's a sample question based on this competency. Okay, can you see why this is a structure question? All right, so that's how it works. There's a lot more of these over in the training area. How many of the 40 questions do you think are going to be based on structure? What would you guess? 10, there you go. How do you know that? Just a good guess, one-fourth of 40. Well, you happen to be right. Okay, the second type of question is based on the competency, vocabulary. That can also be thought of in terms of three main categories, and here they are. Meanings, or the definitions of words. The selection of the proper word according to the meaning. And considering how it might sound to your audience, right? The diction and the tone. And as you might have guessed, how many questions over here? Yes, 10. There you go. All right, here's a sample question. Can you see what's being asked here? That's right, a definition. All right, the third competency is usage, which can be thought of as the types of words and how they're used. Again, you can expect about 10 questions in this area that's called usage. Here's a sample question. Pretty straightforward. All right, the fourth competency then is mechanics. And this competency includes spelling, punctuation, and capitalization. And as you might have guessed, 10 questions in this competency too. So you're correct. An even distribution of the four competencies across the test, but not in order. You know, they're all combined. They're randomized, right? But they're easy to identify. All right, here's again a sample question. A little different format on these, and you'll see plenty of these in the training center. All right, so there you have it. 40 questions, 40 minutes. Anybody have a question about any of this? And I'll repeat it for the people listening to the recording. About the quizzes. Well, here at the test camp, all the quizzes and tests are also randomized, but you're going to get a quiz just on structure and a quiz just on vocabulary, that sort of thing. All right. When you take the test, the practice test, though, um, everything's mixed, so it looks more like your test, right? Now, can you see now that when you can identify a question by the competency, that brings you one step closer to choosing the correct answer. You can see that now? All right. That was helpful. All right, but before we take a look at some sample questions, we know that there's 40 questions. The percent to pass, 71%. Did you know this? So that's about the pass rate for most statewide tests. It seems a little low, but that's about right, 71%. Maybe you at the test camp you have to get 80 to pass. But basically, you're looking for 28 correct answers. Here the goal is 80%, 32 correct. But that's pretty much what you want to be able to get, somewhere around 30, and you'll be fine. Right, but the question here now, again, to talk at your table, is which would you choose? If you could take this English test today, and it was 40 questions just on one of the competencies, what's your strongest area? All right, so talk about that over with your neighbors for a couple of minutes. How do you plan to study for this sort of thing? All right, we'll come back in just a couple of minutes. Hey, if you're joining us today online, live, then share your thoughts and we'll include them up here in the discussion. And if you're joining us on demand, this might be a good time to pause the recording and do a little self-reflection. What's your strongest areas here and what's your weakest areas and what are you thinking about in terms of a plan of study? And we'll be back when you restart the video. Okay, so we're back. A lot of interesting discussion about the strategies to review and study. I think we can say there's no really one right way, but we agree that everybody's going to have to at least review a little bit before they dive in and try to take this test. All right, so to prepare for this test, you joined the workshop already and you gained some knowledge about what to expect. But another way to prepare is to select the tools you might need, the best and most reliable resources for guaranteeing your success. So expect to see this sign along the pathways during your test skills training. They're going to give you encouraging messages. These are the people who have gone before you, told us to post these ideas, and in this case the message is avoid spending your time and money on expensive resources. You just don't need them for this test. Commercial webinars are a good example. Avoid paying for free test information and strategies. Expensive tutors, tutoring companies, that might be an option, but that would be, of course, for more challenging tests than this. Overpriced study guides are out there being sold for profit. Be careful of those. Many of the study guides available are either free or inexpensive. We're going to show you how in just a minute to find those. A more effective and inexpensive resource is a textbook. Now that you know the competencies being tested, use a textbook to review and study the test content. We also have an area in the training center called My Resources, so expect to find the most popular and up-to-date tools for your success there. Again, many of the resources are either free or very inexpensive. You can get a used study guide, look at there, for $3, and there's plenty of them out there too. So again, don't spend invest a lot of your time and money on resources. Instead, how about this? Invest it in yourself. Practice the test skills. Come and join us in the training. Expect to gain confidence. Expect to gain personal independence, not depending on somebody else. Do it yourself. You can do this. Your pass is going to provide admission to these training areas. Up there at the top, we've kind of got into this a little bit already. That's called My Test. This is an activity that enables you to check your understanding of the test blueprint and everything we discussed here today. You can also take a pre-test before you start the training there too. So this is what's called the Test Camp Problem Solving System. This is the first step to finding the correct answer. What we've been doing here today is called to identify the type of question by the competency. So you can see you can get in there and have some fun with that. There's plenty of quizzes and tests that you can take in there too. These are an opportunity to practice your test skills while assessing your test content knowledge. The quizzes, like we mentioned, are based on the competencies, so you can get in there and take those. The questions and answers change randomly, like you'd asked over here, on each attempt. Right. And there's the test that think of the quizzes all mixed together. They're constructed with the features like you can expect to find on test day. So as you complete the training activities, you can earn points toward a professional test certificate that we give out also, and that guarantees your success. So then you can expect to perform with confidence. You have the knowledge, you have the skills, it's time to get started. There's no better time than now to empower your test confidence.